by now you've heard the breaking news that one person has died from the H5N1 bird flu outbreak. You can see the top stories from CNN titled America's First Bird Flu Death Reported in Louisiana. You can see her from Forbes magazine, CBS, Live Sciences, NPR. Every major media outlet is highlighting that one 65-year-old, I don't know if this is a male or female, with underlying health conditions became severely ill from the H5N1 avian flu in the state of Louisiana. Now, I don't want to disparage this person. We, bless their family and bless his soul. It's really sad and unfortunate when anyone dies. But I think it's important to put this in context in terms of how many people die every single day from entirely preventable diet, nutrition, and lifestyle-related diseases. For example, here in the US, during the year 2022, 2,552 people died every single day from cardiovascular disease, which is a disease caused, obviously there's a genetic element to it, stress and other lifestyle factors, but largely from inactivity, from eating ultra-processed foods and not living a healthy lifestyle. So why aren't we highlighting that? Major media outlets, we should be talking about that, as well as the 821 some odd people who die every single day in the US from obesity, right? Many of these major media outlets, they conveniently take advertising dollars from ultra-processed food companies. If you turn on the television, during major, whether it's the election or watch a Super Bowl on NBC or ABC, sporting events, or get your news from whether it's NPR, CNN, MSNBC, fill in the blank, oftentimes you will get retargeted on your computer, or if you're watching this streaming on YouTube, you'll get retargeted from food companies that are selling children Lunchables, for example, or soda, Coke Zero, whatever. And we know these foods are directly causative of multiple conditions that kill people every single day. And so what I want to do in this video is just highlight the bias from the media. And also, it seems to be a cognitive bias. And I think a lot of people don't understand how these twin epidemics converge. And we saw this all throughout COVID. And many of you, thankfully, saw this. And that's why you're still here on our YouTube channel. We saw how obesity and underlying chronic health conditions like insulin resistance, which needless to say, we have this data from the year 2022. And we've talked about this study many, many times. And I'll share this on the screen with you right now. This is an analysis looking at the dearth or the lack of metabolic health in 93.2% of US adults. The title of this report is Trends and Disparities in Cardiometabolic Health Among US Adults between the years 1999 and 2018. And we are seeing a dramatic reversal away from optimal metabolic health towards a state of disease. And that's where I want to go with this video, because whether it's H5N1 or there's this new virus in China that everyone's freaking out about over on X and Twitter, we had COVID. The major lesson herein is that metabolically compromised or metabolically sick people, really, quite frankly, again, from our subsidization of commodity crops that make junk food artificially cheaper than healthy alternatives, we are not incentivizing exercise. We could easily reverse this trend with public health policy that would enable tax credits, for example, if you could show in a Fitbit or Garmin that you walk 10,000 steps a day. I mean, these implementing public health measures to make people healthier would lessen the urgency when there are new respiratory pathogens that emerge, because invariably these pathogens will continue to emerge. They have emerged all throughout humanity and they will continue to emerge in the future. But the major problem here is that we have many people that are sick because of their own diet and lifestyle choices. And it's not necessarily their fault. They did consume and buy the foods, but our institutions and the way that we allocate financial spending, taxpayer dollars, for example, the Farm Bill, you can go on Amazon and you can buy Cheez-Its, you can buy Pop-Tarts. If you're a low-income individual, you can use your SNAP dollars towards buying these ultra-processed foods that make you metabolically sick, that will make you more vulnerable to getting severely ill with an infectious disease and a pathogen. So we're going to talk a little bit more about that connection. But first, I want to thank you all for being here. Hopefully you're enjoying the content. If you are, please hit that like button. Be sure to share this video with a friend if you're getting value from this. And also, since we're talking about metabolic health, I want to remind you about a natural tool that's been used for 3,000 years in Chinese medicine as well as Ayurvedic medicine. This is berberine hydrochloride. You've probably heard a lot about it as of late because Western scientists have been looking at the effects that berberine has on supporting metabolic health, mimicking the effects of fasting and helping to support healthy glucose metabolism and beyond. There's over 17 human clinical studies finding that berberine is quite effective for helping support metabolic health. And there's over 330 some odd reviews from customers just like you over at myoscience.com that are using the berberine fasting accelerator to accelerate their fast and help to curb evening food cravings for foods that derail your health progress. So if you want to optimize metabolic health in 2025 and beyond, please go to myoscience.com and use the code podcast at checkout. I will link that in the description below. So getting back to the connection here, I do need to finish up on one image here, and this is the trends in adiposity and blood glucose. As I mentioned, this is using NHANES data going back from 1999 to 2018. I would wager that if they were to look at more recent NHANES data, and you've probably heard about this, the National Health and Nutrition Examination Survey. This is an ongoing epidemiological survey where we have pretty good epidemiological data showing people's body mass index and their blood glucose levels and so forth using large cohorts, which represent the average American. And so this data is important when we look at the trends in metabolic health, which, as you can see, are going in the wrong direction. My point here is I bet this data is actually worse now after the COVID-19 pandemic. So even at the end of 2018, it was 93.2% of US adults have some degree of poor metabolic health. And that is characterized by increases in visceral adipose tissue or belly fat, changes in blood glucose, changes in blood pressure, changes in blood lipids like blood triglycerides and beyond. So it's not to say that 93% of Americans are overweight, but have some symptom or manifestation of poor underlying metabolic health. Because we know that COVID caused obesity to increase in all age categories and so forth, and that people were more sedentary and haven't reversed those trends, sadly. I would suspect this is probably closer to 9%. But as they say in this article, only 6.8% of US adults have optimal cardiometabolic health, and disparities exist by age. It turns out that men over 65, it's like 2%. Only 2% of men over 65 have optimal cardiometabolic health. And so going back to the media, I mean, we see the media just hype all these infectious disease outbreaks like crazy. Oh my gosh, someone died from COVID. Perfectly healthy person was severely ill from COVID, right? And then you look at the Facebook page or the Instagram page of this person and they're drinking Mountain Dew and wolfing down pastries and things. And I'm not disparaging these people, but we need our institutions to get on the metabolic health train so that we don't have all of these young individuals getting severely ill from respiratory outbreaks, for example. And so this is all tethered because it turns out that when you're metabolically compromised, you get what's known as immunosenescence. Your immune cells become chronically inflamed and activated because of the insulin resistance. And this is two sides of the same coin. And it's known as immunometabolism or inflammaging in the literature, if you want to dive into this. We can't disentangle the epidemic of chronic disease from acute respiratory or any infectious disease outbreak. They are completely interconnected because it turns out that your host immune health will impact the manifestation of the disease or the pathogenicity of the disease. The more resilient and healthy one is, the less likely that virus or bacteria will cause that person to be compromised. And I know a lot of you will say, well, who are you to say this? The data has shown that. And we saw that data in March of 2020. And we've talked about this at length on this channel. The other reason why I'm not particularly concerned about the bird H5N1, again, I admit I'm not an infectious disease expert. I'm not an immunologist. But there's this law that we talked about COVID. I think it's helpful to remember the law of declining virulence, that there's this trade-off. And so we know that the infectious fatality rate for H5N1 is actually quite high. And that's why a lot of these so-called experts are concerned about that. It's estimated to be like 40% or some such thing, even though there's been a lot more confirmed cases and only now one confirmed death, but they speculate that the IFR is quite high. That might sound really scary, but in my opinion, that's probably a good thing. If you think about Ebola, the infectious fatality rate is really, really high. If you get Ebola and you don't get medical treatment, you're very likely to die. The good thing about Ebola is it's not very transmissible. So there tends to be this trade-off with these different pathogens where if the virulence is exceedingly high, there's a compromise in the transmissibility. And that has been shown to be true in multiple different infectious disease outbreaks, including COVID-19, including MERS, including the SARS-CoV-1 outbreak, where the transmissibility wasn't that high, but the lethality was quite high. And then we saw that with SARS-CoV-2. The infectious fatality rate early on was actually higher, but as the virus was able to improve its ability to transmit and infect more and more people, the virulence actually went down. And so you saw that throughout. And look at Omicron now, highly transmissible, not very virulent, right? It doesn't cause you to, really get severely ill. And so I think this is probably good news, even if the IFR on H5N1 is quite high. You have to remember that by and large, for the majority of respiratory viruses, there is this transmissibility and pathogenicity trade-off. And it's known as the law of declining virulence. If you think about a virus doesn't have its own part. It has its own, RNA or DNA, depending on the type of virus, but it needs the host machinery, your lipids, your protein, your glucose, to replicate. It needs to get in your cells and hijack your own macronutrients and micronutrients, right? So if it's just killing people, it's not able to reproduce as effectively because the host dies, right? So it's going to evolve and learn how to infect more people without actually killing them. That makes a lot of sense from a natural selection standpoint. And if you're SARS-CoV-2, you're doing that pretty well right now. You're winning the natural selection race because you're infecting a ton of people, but not many people are dying. Right. And so that's why Ebola was never a pandemic, right? There's still cases in Africa, but it's so lethal that pathogen hasn't been able to successfully figure out how to transmit, because once someone is severely ill, they're isolated, they're quarantined, and they usually will get really, really sick and die or need extensive medical attention. And they're isolated from the rest of humanity, right? So this is why I'm not particularly concerned about H5N1, but I think we all should be concerned about metabolic health because, as I mentioned, the first patient who died in Louisiana was over the age of 65 and had chronic health conditions. That should be the headline. That should be the headline to motivate people who are concerned, because I don't know about you, but I recently traveled over the holiday season and many people are wearing masks again, double masks on airplanes, but they have no problem accepting the pretzels and the chips and the cookies from the flight attendants who are, kindly passing out these items on the airplane. So again, we should be concerned about metabolic health because statistically that could improve our odds of having a more robust immunologic response should we get exposed to a pathogen in the future, which is inevitable. Right? We are all at some point going to be exposed to a pathogen. So please do the very things that you should be doing anyway. Walking 10 to 12,000 steps per day. Trying to cut out the ultra processed foods in your diet. That doesn't mean you can never have cookies, or if you go and see a movie with your family, you can have popcorn every now and again. But we need to practice the 90-10 rule or the 80-20 rule when it comes to nutrition. Try to cook your food from scratch. Try to eat as much, prioritize protein, 1 gram per pound of ideal body weight. Try not to have fried foods. You all know the drill when it comes to nutrition for the most part, and try to optimize your circadian rhythm. That's really important. We've talked about that at length. Go to bed at the same time every night. Wake up at the same time every day. Expose yourself to full body sunlight as much as possible. Optimize micronutrients like vitamin D, vitamin A. There's so many, things that we can do to optimize our health, my friends. And sadly, we're not hearing about that from our media or the health institutions. But they definitely get a lot of buzz over the acute illness deaths, unfortunately. But we should be equally concerned if we care about saving lives, the 2,500 people that die every day from heart disease. A lot of that's preventable. So I think we should be making the main thing, as Stephen Covey has talked about. Make Americans metabolically healthy again. How about that? I would love to know what you think in the comment section below, my friends. Thanks for tuning all the way through. We'll catch you on a future one down the road.